Welcome, and coming up on this week's Tech Show, a new helmet, a smorgasbord of new wheels, and much, much more. How long should components last for? Yeah, I know, it's an interesting question, isn't it? And it was posed to me by a friend, I think off the back of last week's show where I blamed pro riders for ruining bikes, not journos. I think you're to blame. If you haven't watched it, you should probably watch it. And yeah, if you've got an opinion on that, join the comments. So back to his question, which was, how long should components last? In mountain bikes, well, first it was a really simple mantra of like, stronger is better. Whether you're a rider or a racer, more racers again, well, it was either like your race or your ride would be ruined with these sort of like early mountain bike parts that failed. So these early mountain bike brands basically bet their whole existence on needing to make better and longer lasting parts, something that can be trusted. Some brands use racers to build better products. Yes, XT was a powerful trending force because it kind of matched where we were riding. And obviously with anything competitive and the fact that those early bikes were, well, really heavy, we got lighter and lighter. And we started that kind of, I guess, march to the weight weenie where we ended up. And I know last week I was chipping away at races, but I've got to admit the races in that era, well, they were good for the sport, and the races were good for the sport. And yeah, I should explain why I've had this change of heart, and I should explain a little bit more about those races. So the race that I'm talking about, the classic iconic cross-country races, and specifically the ones set up by Norba. So that was the National Off-Road Bicycle Association. It was formed in 1983. And it really helped steer racing, but it also helped create better products for me and for you. And you might be wondering, but Owen, just last week you were slagging these pros off and now you think they're helping. Okay, I'll explain. So in Norba races, you had to carry all your own tools and your spares. So there wasn't a tech zone. A tech zone. Yeah, okay, I should mention what those are. So it's kind of cross-country race stuff. It's a bit nerdy. So in a modern cross-country race, you'll have, and you might have seen it, you'll see these areas where a rider might charge in to get something as simple as a flat fixed or something as gnarly as maybe a bar replaced or something like that. Well, this tech zone thing is a new thing because you can roll in and your mechanic can actually fix it. I mean, you can have fresh wheels, you can have fresh tyres, there's a lot that can get changed. So those founders of Norba wanted to keep it a more level playing field and, well, keep the racing a bit like riding. So if you're out in the boonies, aka the middle of nowhere, and you've got a flat tyre, well, there isn't a tech zone that you can just sort of roll into and you've got to fix the bike yourself. But this is where it's really good. This rule is sort of a double-edged sword. So if you're a racer, of course, you're always going to run the lightest part you can. But if you've got to fix it, well, it's got to be a good part. And also, if you're a brand and you're wanting to put those racers out there with your brand name on them, and they can't, you know, magically roll into the tech zone and get it fixed, you've also got to make lightweight parts that can last. So it's like this perfect thing of, you're going to get a racing lightweight product, but that also means it's going to be a tough product. And there's early years of cross-country. Some of the cross-country races were like 40 and 50 mile affairs or even longer. So I guess it's a long way of saying, I admit I was wrong about last week. And yes, those races in those early days helped make better bikes, and they made better bikes for us all. Brands had to develop better kit that could last under race conditions and without the kind of use of a tech zone or mechanics to fix stuff on the go. Yeah, more on tech zone. Since 2005, they appeared at cross-country races. Essentially, there was a tube and some tools, and you had to do it yourself. And then around 2006, that's when the mechanics appeared, and it sort of, I think the angle was it's a bit like Formula One. And yeah, it can make racing more exciting. You know, perhaps it does, but I do feel that it's at the cost to us as riders that those racers can just run, yeah, super light parts that if it breaks, well, it doesn't matter. Okay, cross-country tracks have gotten a lot burlier, so I should be mindful about that. But it's good and worth noting that enduro racing has sort of returned to these roots, and the classic sort of 2-day EWS events of old are especially noteworthy because they had a rule, and still do, where you have to run the same parts at the start of the weekend when you start the race at the end. And I do think that definitely helped toughen up wheels, not so much a wheel standard, but wheels themselves. Like racers couldn't risk a carbon wheel breaking. So yeah, anyway, right, enough race rambling. Back to that question about how long stuff is meant to last. We've kind of gone through the journey of how to get tougher stuff. Right, trail riding is great. How do we define it? How are we going to define which trail are we riding? Because for one person, that genre of trail riding is sort of down country, and for another person, it's enduro. So that's harder to decide. But before we kind of carry on, there are actually some standards which mountain bikes have to sort of pass from a safety perspective. They've got a catchy title, which is the ISO 4210. That's the international standard, that's the SA bit. And that establishes a safety requirement specification, and it's for the design, the manufacture, and the testing of bicycles. So there's subsets within all of this sort of like test overarching thing for brakes, 4 wheels, 4 frames, 4 cockpit parts. So lots of big brands test to that standard. They actually often test above. It's often a fatigue test, so things are whacked and wobbled and wiggled under certain loads. And effectively there's a cut-off point where it's like, tick, that's a pass, and that's a fail. There's also the ASTM standard. It's actually a guide. So it's a kind of category of tests that bikes have to meet, and opposed to just being kind of like a pass-fail, it describes what the trail features that you'll encounter. So level of drop-off, amount of abuse, and kind of weight and things like this of the bike. So it's actually a really good standard. Originally, this ASTM was the American Society for Testing and Materials, and it develops voluntary consensus technical international standards in a wide range of materials, products, systems, and services. So it's like a rating for different parts. So you've got frames, you've got wheels. Okay, not all brands are testing to it or mentioning it, but lots of them are. For mountain bike, there's 4 different rankings. Okay, within the cycling segment, technically there's actually 5, but the first category is essentially for sort of road and very much gravel bikes, and we need much more than that. Each category, as I've mentioned, lists the different terrain that you're going to ride, the level of drop-offs, literally the centimetre height that you're going to kind of tackle, and the bike to pass or be in that category can tackle safety. Okay, I feel like that is a lot of health and safety, but like with health and safety, we've ticked it off, so it's all okay. But back to that question of how long does stuff actually last? And I know that I'll get some heat in the comments about this, because I know it sounds a bit wishy-washy, because the answer is, well, it sort of depends. But here's a good thing. If you think about me, and then you think about Steve Jones over on EMBN, okay, he is riding e-bikes at the moment, but he is a very fast former DH racer. He raced at a really high level. He's like a medalist from the Masters World Champs. And then there's me. I'm a bike nerd. I'm about 70 kgs on a good day. Jonesy is probably a little bit more. But it's not just the weight, it's how Steve is going to attack a trail and like how he's going to ride the bike. It's really different. So we're going to have to be mindful about, if you're a bigger, stronger rider and you're riding really burly terrain regularly, your bike and equipment is going to get loaded up more. So contact points, bars, stems, cranks, tyres, all of those parts where fatigue is going to be an issue in its life are probably going to need to be replaced more often. Of course, there's more factors involved in this, and that's like, how much do you ride? If you're getting in bike park laps daily, then that fatigue cycle of the loading of all these parts is going to go up a mountain more than if you're just riding weekly. I mean, I know with drivetrain we've done a topic just over the weekend talking about mechanical versus electronic, and we talked about wear in that one, and it's really tricky, because the drivetrain lifespan is going to be down to how you ride, how you're shifting those gears, but also literally the environment that you're riding it in. If you're rallying the trails in really wet, gritty, muddy conditions, well, that can just eat through chains and thus eat through cassettes really quickly, much more so than if you're riding in really nice, dry and dreamy, low dust conditions. Yeah, of course, a kind of good maintenance schedule of like making sure you're degreasing and lubing your chain, and a sensible sort of washing schedule can all help. But there's stuff that we just can't get around in terms of saying a chain will last for this long or another part will last this long. Another factor, I know there's lots of factors, is just being honest. Like, do you crash lots? Because those impacts are going to kind of stress and fatigue parts even more. I know some brands that recommend replacing parts, especially handlebars, even if they're aluminium or carbon, after a crash. And I'm not saying, the bar's bent, but just you've had a crash. I know that'll be a discussion point for many, so dive into the comments, let me know your thoughts on that. But back to that original question, and I've got to answer it in a way that answers lots of tech questions. And it kind of depends on what you're doing with them. So, what do you think of the stands that we've got there? Do you care about them? Do you care about these categories? And how long do you think parts should last? Do you think there should be a ranking of this will last for ages and this is paper thin and won't last that long? Join the comments, join the debate down below. Exciting stuff here. We have got the new Met Revo helmet. So Met, one of the kind of innovators, Italian brand that's made helmets for quite a long time, have got a new helmet, the Revo. And I've got to say, it is a good looking helmet. Obviously looks aren't everything, but it definitely helps. So what else have we got? What's interesting about it? Okay. Met have wanted to move their helmet on from what they'd done before, which was the Roam. So they've focused on function, kind of key things for a helmet. They've elevated the ventilation and the safety standards beyond what they'd already got. So they've already got a pretty comfy and safe helmet. I rode one for some of the EMTB shoots recently. But this is where it gets fun and nerdy. Met also make road helmets too, and they've got their own wind tunnel. You might think, well, that's not that exciting, Owen, but it is, because it's a low-speed wind tunnel. And you might be thinking, well, Owen, I'm not getting aero on my mountain bike, so why should I care? And you're right, you probably shouldn't care that much about getting aero, but that's not why they've used it. No. What they've done is they've been able to engineer a better ventilated helmet, because they've been able to put the helmet in with a kind of special heat map thing and loads of measurement nodes and prods, and work out the airflow going in versus the airflow going out, and actually how they can design these scoops and the airflow essentially inside the helmet to be, well, really cooling. So this helmet is more cooling than the outgoing model, and they've got science to prove it. Safety, well, again, I think this is a tricky one in terms of how safe is a helmet? And Met have tried to, beat their old standards, and what they've lent into is the Virginia Tech test. So this is a US university, and it's been making real waves in the helmet industry and ruffling quite a few feathers as well, especially within the helmet brands. So what they've done is they've got a more in-depth test protocol. So the Virginia Tech one tests 6 different impacts, and it's got data sort of added into this test from linear, so that's think just the whack, and it's got the rotational. So this is where your brain is floating in a fluid inside your brain, and as you get a whack on your head, that brain is going to slosh around. How much it sloshes around, well, that can impact what you have in terms of a concussion. It can be really nasty, but this Virginia Tech test, hopefully, not conclusively, but it's a more detailed test than the standards we've had previously. So getting a 5-star result is impressive, and that's what this helmet gets. So it's also, this is where it gets real nerdy, and some of you might just like it, but it's okay, the newer safety standards of the NT 8776. The visor is adjustable, as you might expect. It's really flexible as well, so that's really good because that can impact on that rotation test in a negative way. Inside there is MIPS as well, so it's the MIPS air node. So rather than having a slide layer of plastic and then pad stuck on, the pad's the slide layer. It's really adjustable too, so it's got 3 height positions. There's a fidlock closure, which is really nice. It's just like a magnetic closure, so you don't have to fiddle with the buckle. There's 3 different shell sizes, so it means that Met can cover from 52 centimeters all the way up to 61 centimeters in terms of head diameter. There's a mountain of colors of 2. You've got a black, you've got an off-white, there's an olive, a navy, a midnight forest, and I believe there's also a purple haze limited edition. So yeah, pricing is €200 or $169.99 or $230 or 300 Canadian US dollars. And this is where it gets very exciting. Met and Bluegrass are now a partner on GMBN Tech, so you'll be seeing this helmet and others a lot more. Ooyy, formerly known as Fazari, it's a US direct-to-consumer brand. I think it's available in some shops as well, so it's sort of mixed. They've got an all-new XC and short travel trail bike called the Signal. We've got 110mm of rear travel paired with a 120mm fork, so it's been designed to be cross-country race-ish, and one of the models rolls in at under £24, so it's impressive, and that's their stat. We haven't got one and weighed it. But what's nice is the geometry is pretty modern. Head angle is 66 degrees, seat angle is 76. The reach runs, and this is really interesting, from 425mm in the smallest size up to 505. That's a really big reach. It's across 4 sizes, so you should find something that you want. The suspension is Ari's own Tetralink. And to be fair, it looks very similar to some of the single pivot link activated shock designs with a flex stay. So instead of having an extra pivot either on the chain stay or on the seat stay, you've got this missing pivot where the seat stay can bow. So it's a really nice lightweight setup, and it's, well, less maintenance because there's one less pivot. It's got all the features that you'd like to see. So it's got dual bottle mounts inside the frame, plus a sort of tool or bottle mount down below. And of course, it's UDH hanger compatible. Lifetime warranty too. Frame, fork and shock come in at $3,499 US. Complete bikes with Shimano Dior 12 speed come in at $3,799. So that's only sort of 300 quid more, which is pretty good. And then they've also got a SRAM XX SL transmission with all the bells and whistles at $9,399. So pretty spendy, but interesting that they've got a sort of lower rent one. Let me know your thoughts on that in the comments below. Industry 9 have got some new wheels and, well, new hubs too. So they've got the Hydra 2 hub, and I guess they've got complete wheels as well. The Hydra 2, brace yourself because this is impressive in terms of points of engagement. It's got 870 points of engagement. So if we turn that into degrees, it's 0.41 degree engagement, which is, yeah, I mean, that's like a Swiss watch engaging. It's quite incredible. It's also got 60% less coasting drag over the older offerings from i9. So if you're a big fan of the super high engagement, I mean, this is, yeah, a very good offering. But let me know in the comments if you're a fan of really high engagement hubs or if you're not that bothered. You've probably seen the i9 wheels over on EMBN, and they do not just the hubs differently, but they're doing the kind of spokes and how the whole wheel goes together slightly differently too, because they've got aluminium alloy spokes rather than steel, and the spokes thread directly into the hub. So it is a direct pull, but it's aluminium spoke. So it is quite different. The spokes are oversized, they're really burly, so if you've got any kind of concerns about them being aluminium and maybe fragile, well, Jonesy and Neil have been running them without any dramas. Specialized wheel brand, which is Roval, they've got some new cross-country super light hoops. And the headline figures is that these wheels, with, I'm pretty sure it's with tape and valves as well, are sub 1 kilo. Yeah, that's for the pair. In my head, I think that's the lightest full-size AK29er XC wheel set that I've seen. I mean, there might be others. Let me know in the comments if you've seen lighter wheels. They were tested by a specialised cross-country race team last year with success. Okay, so we're going to get into the stats and nerdy bits. The rim inner width is 29mm. The rim height is only 26, so it's quite wide and broad and flat. The hubs are Roval, so that's like Specialized's own, but actually the internal bits, at least of the rear hub, the clicky bit, is actually a DT internal. They've updated it with jazzy ceramic bearings. The spokes are carbon and titanium, and here's those weights. So 446 grams for the front and 546 grams for the rear. So yeah, 992 grams. I mean, yeah, that's just wild. Something else that's pretty wild is the small print on the pricing. So your front wheel is $1,300 US. Your rear is $1,700. So the complete pair is, hold on mathematicians at the back of the room, $3,000. That's big money. Just for reference, the World Championship winning KFX i28s from FSA are yours for, well, around 1,600 quid. But yeah, there's more wheel news because you wait for one wheel and then 3 come at once. Okay, DT Swiss, the Swiss wheel brand, they've got a new set of changing their tone completely we've got dirt jump hubs and dirt jump hoops. So yeah, they've got a 370 dirt jump hub. So it's like a classic high flange aluminium hub for J-bend spokes. The spacing is a little bit different from what you might imagine because dirt jump bikes are a little bit different. So the front is 20mm by 110. So effectively it's not really boost, it's like a 20mm, but you can convert it to 15 by 100. So that covers those sort of dirt jump bolt through forks. The rear is only available in a 10 by 135mm, so that's like a bolt-on old school standard. The internals are a 36 tooth ratchet, so this is DT Swiss's sort of star ratchet internal thing. It's single speed only, but with a free hub, and it integrates a 12 tooth cog. It is 6 bolt IS on the rear because the front, because they're dirt jumpers, there's no brake mount. So it's like, well, I guess it would work with rim brakes, wouldn't it? But anyway, 32 spoke holes, front and rear. And yeah, complete wheels are available too. So they're running on 26-inch, yay, 26-inch rims, 35mm wide external, 20mm deep, 30mm internal, tubeless ready, which is interesting because I'm not sure that many dirt jumpers run tubeless. They're pre-taped, no valves, and here's the weight. Here's what you've wanted to know. 2,262 grams. So yeah, much smaller wheel, but much, much stronger, which I guess links into what we were saying about we're designing products for doing different things. So if you did cross country on a dirt jump wheel or the other way around, well, it could end in disaster. Complete wheel set is $450 US. The hubs are $69 US for the front, or $161 US for the rear. So pretty good value on that wheel set. We've got a great question here from Chris W6CE for Ask GMBN Tech, where you can use the hashtag AskGMBNTech to get, well, a tech question answered, essentially. So his question is all about tubeless. It was on one of our wheel videos, which is the history of wheels, which if you've not watched, even Gary Fisher commented on it. I know, it's a big flex from me. I don't normally flex, I try and be humble, but when the godfather of mountain biking chats on the comments, it's worth mentioning. So back to Chris's question. When the manufacturer says a wheel is tubeless ready, do I need to put rim tape in or not? This is a really good question because we kind of talk about tubeless ready standards and we need to talk about various things. So first is check the rim. So the rim will say somewhere on it, tubeless ready. You might have to do a bit of research. You might have to Google what brand of rim it is. The next thing you'll need to inspect is, does it have tape on it already, or does it just have a rim strip where it's just protecting sort of like those spoke holes and protecting the tube from each other? So those are things that you need to consider. Next thing you need to look at is the tyre. Some brands will use a kind of OEM original equipment tyre that is not tubeless ready. It might look really similar, but it won't say tubeless ready on it. And yes, you can convert like tubeless ready, non-tubeless ready tyres, but the official guidance to be safe, because we don't want tyres blowing off, is to only use proper tubeless ready tyres, or UST tyres even, with tubeless ready rims, because you can get these incompatibility where stuff doesn't work. In regards to that rim tape, if you've got a rim strip, so that's like a rubber strip sometimes, or it could be a fabric strip, you'll need to remove that. So you just down to those bare sort of holes in the rim to see the spokes through. You'll need to seal that. That's what your rim tape's doing, is sealing those holes. And you might need, well, you might need 1 lap of tape. Realistically, you need 1.5 always, but you might need as much as 3. Depending on how much will be how tight the kind of the rim and tyre profile is. I've done a video that explains it better than I can now, but essentially you want a really nice tight interface fit because it means it will be able to air up with just a floor pump opposed to having to use a compressor. But check those things first, because it's easy for brands, well, just to miss things, or you to miss things, and you can convert lots of non-tubeless stuff to be tubeless, but best practice, which is all I can do here, because I want you to be safe and you to come back, is make sure you use proper tubeless stuff. Right, we'll put a link to that video in the description below, but if you've got a burning question about tech, whether it be tubeless tyres or rims or, well, anything else that we discuss here, use the hashtag AskGMBNTech and we'll try and answer it. Okay, now we dive into my favourite section, which is the comments. You might wonder why it's my favourite, because, you know, last week we had somebody bullying me about my hair and I said silly things on the show, but people pulled me up on it, which is good. I think the big thing about the comment section that I like is there is a community, and here's some great kind of highlights. We're talking about whether pros or journalists have sort of ruined bikes, and Rinzy's Ranger says, prices are the problem, matey. It's getting out of hand for most working people. You're right, there are some seriously steep prices on bikes, but Tim Sadler, hi Tim, did reply with a really good sort of in-depth answer, and that was like, if you're looking at those top spec bikes, which unfortunately we do cover here in kind of like high degree, we do cover them, but 500 quid, this is what Tim's saying, 500 quid gets you a whole lot more bike than it did 5 years ago. And I have to agree, if you're looking at some of the caliber bikes, they are amazing value. If you look at some of the entry-level Canyons or Orbeas, what you get on that bike, even sort of 5 years ago, would have been almost double the price. Tim also adds, well, don't forget you can buy second-hand, especially with oldies getting rid of their dream enduro bikes so they can buy e-bikes to save their knees. Well said, Tim. Also, Tim, he's saying that this is just about talking about kind of reviews and pros talking about things. And he's like, all good points. This is replying to Yoda Pig, that integrity and transparency are key, because if you're looking at reviews to buy a better bike, it can be tricky. How do you know where, is that person being paid to say those good things? And if you're about to drop big money on a bike, Tim recommends, well, don't trust the review of just one person. I have to agree, very good. Okay, Timmy or Thim 8009, he rides very technical terrain and he can tell the difference of his bike being in the high or low flip chip, and he says it blows him away that just a small movement, the width of a pencil, makes a difference. So some of these reviewers are making a difference. What are we looking forward to this week? Well, we've got a great video on our expensive brake pads, worth it. I'll let you watch the video. And we've got one bike in 3 different ways, which sounds confusing, but I promise it's good fun. Enjoy.